Morning campers, welcome back. Right, I've been asked by a lot of people to make this video. So if you are thinking about having a go at learning how to fly something like this, but you don't know where to start, what you've got to do, and more importantly, how much it's going to cost, then this is just for you. In this video, I am going to explain exactly how much it costs from start to finish for me to get this, my National Private Pilot's License. Then I'm going to share with you how much it cost me to buy and insure and hangar my aircraft before finally giving you a detailed breakdown of the annual costs associated with keeping that aircraft in the sky. So if you're curious about that and you want to see what those numbers look like, then stick around and let me tell you. Right, if you know absolutely nothing about microlighting and you are starting from the very beginning, then the best place to start is the BMAA website, or the British Microlight Aircraft Association website. I'll put a link on the screen and there's a link in the description down below as well. On that website there is a whole host of information talking about what microlighting is all about, the history of it, what all the different types of microlights there are, and also there is a section on there that is called How Do I Become a Microlight Pilot? If you click on that link, it will tell you that the first thing you need to do is go and find your local microlight school, and helpfully there is a feature on the website where you can type your postcode in and it will return a list of microlight schools near you. So once you've found your local microlight school, go and pay them a visit and actually start speaking to people. You will find that microlight pilots in the main are an extremely friendly bunch of people that are only too happy to spend hours talking to you about flying. Once you've done that, you then need to arrange a trial flight with an instructor. That will give you a flavour of what it's all about, and from that you will find out whether it's something that you would like or not. I remember my first trial flight, I had a smile on my face for about a week that I couldn't get rid of. One thing that is worth considering before you start your NPPL journey, and that is the medical requirements to fly a microlight in the UK. They are fairly relaxed, and essentially if you are fit and well enough to hold a full UK driving licence, then you are fit and well enough to learn to fly a microlight, and that is managed by means of a self-declaration. So before you start your training, you need to go onto the CAA website and fill out a medical declaration. Once you've done that, you are then deemed fit to fly. There are some medical conditions that would preclude you from flying, and they are the same sort of conditions that would preclude you from having a driving licence. If you're wondering what they are, then if you go on the BMAA website, then that gives you a bit more information about all the medical stuff. In order for some of these costs that I'm going to talk about to start making some sense, it's worth talking just briefly about the NPPL syllabus and what you actually have to do to get your licence. It is available to download on the BMAA website. You can go on there and it will give you in detail exactly every single step of the syllabus. But just to summarise it, essentially there are three separate elements to the syllabus. The first of which is that you must undergo a minimum of 25 hours of instruction in the air. Some of that instruction has to be solo and some of it has to be undertaking navigation exercises. Now it's worth mentioning at this point that 25 hours is an absolute minimum. Don't make the mistake of thinking that you will do it in 25 hours. The chances are it will take you longer. The average is currently closer to 43 hours, and the older you get, the longer it takes. It's just a simple fact. So make sure you factor that into your calculations when deciding on how much it's going to cost, or trying to figure out how much it's going to cost you to get your license. Right, so as well as the lessons, there's also some written examinations that you need to take. There are 5 altogether, and they are in meteorology, navigation, aviation law, human factors, and aircraft technical. And then as well as those written examinations, there is also an oral examination which is normally conducted at the same time as your general skills test, and in that the examiner will ask you questions specific to the type of aircraft that you are flying. And then finally there is the general skills test, the dreaded GST, which is essentially your driving test but for flying. Once you satisfy all 3 elements, you can then apply for your NPPL licence. I should just mention there is a slightly cheaper way of getting into the air, and that is if you elect to do the restricted NPPL license. That is cheaper because you only need to do 15 hours, or a minimum of 15 hours instruction, as opposed to 25 for the full NPPL. However, as the name suggests, there are some restrictions. Those restrictions being that you are then limited to flying in certain weather conditions. You cannot take a passenger, and you can only fly within 8 miles of the airfield that you took off from. It's also worth mentioning sub-70 aircraft at this point. You might be looking at flying something like a peabee or one of the other sub-70 aircraft that are available. Now, strictly speaking, legally you can fly a sub-70 aircraft without a license. However, I would strongly urge you to make sure that you do undertake some training. If you were to try and fly an aircraft like that with no previous experience, at best you might scare yourself into the air, but I do not think it would end well for you. If you were to undergo sub 70 training at one of the Microlight schools, they would follow a syllabus very, very similar to the NPPL restricted syllabus, which is a minimum of 15 hours. So you can gauge roughly how much it would cost you if the sub 70 is the route that you're thinking of going down. Right, let's actually start talking about numbers, shall we? Firstly, I should say that I underwent my National Private Pilot's License training 4 years ago, so the figures that I'm going to give you are a little bit cheaper than they actually are today. You'll have to adjust them for inflation. By far the biggest single expenditure was the actual lessons themselves. Now, at the time I did my training, an hour's instruction in a Flexwing aircraft was £110 per hour. For example, the school that I fly at now charge £135 an hour, so that'll give you some sort of rough idea as an hourly rate. I underwent 43 hours of instruction before I took my general skills test. Now, the school that I flew from did a bit of a deal, whereas if you bought 10 lessons, you essentially got an 11th free. So the total cost for my lessons alone was £4,290. The next expense that I had is an optional expense. You don't have to buy this, but I bought my own flying suit and my own helmet. I won't go into detail as to what they were. All the details about all of my equipment is all down in the description below. But I bought my own flying suit and helmet, and that cost me a total of £610. So the next series of expenses that I had in order to get my license were to do with the written exams. In order to pass the written exams, you're going to have to do some learning, and in order to do some learning, you're going to need to buy some books and materials. So what I'll do is I'll take you through what books and materials that I bought, what books and materials I reckon you're going to need, and how much they are. So the first book that I bought is the Microlight Pilots Handbook by Brian Cosgrove. This is a very, very good introduction. It gives you a bit of a flavour of all of the topics that are on all of the written exams that you have to pass. Does it contain enough information for you to pass the exams? I think probably not, but it certainly gives you a very, very good introduction. I would say that although this is in its 8th edition, some of the air law in here is slightly out of date, so you must make sure that you are up to date with the current legislation. Legislation changes all the time, so make sure you're up to date with that before you take the air law exam. This book cost me £16, and if you're going to buy one book to get yourself started, then I would recommend this one. So the next book, which I think is an absolute must, is Air Law for Microlight Pilots by Jeff Whale. Now, Air Law is one of the most important exams because you need to have passed that exam before you can fly solo. So if you are wondering what order to do the exams, then I would certainly make sure that you put Air Law towards the front. This book cost me £13, and this is a definite must. The next book that I would recommend that will help you pass the meteorology exam is Pilot's Weather, which is also written by Brian Cosgrove, but this goes into a lot more detail, and this will certainly contain enough information for you to pass the meteorological exam. I really struggled with Met. There are so many things that affect the weather that I just found it extremely confusing, but this book helped me out no end, and this book cost £36, quite expensive, but again, a must if you want to pass the Met exam. Another publication that I would highly recommend is from the CAA, and this is the Skyway Code. This basically is a guide to general aviation pilots to help you operate safely in the air. It is available to download for absolutely free from the CAA website, but if you want to buy a hard copy, then this cost me £12, and again, I would absolutely thoroughly recommend that you get yourself a copy of this. Right, we're almost getting to the end of the materials, but another book that I would thoroughly recommend, and this is to do with the actual practical lessons, and this is the Flexwing briefing notes, which you can get from Flylight. If you go on the Flylight website, description down below, then you can get yourselves a copy of this. This is really useful because it takes each of the individual lessons that you have to go through and gives you a briefing as to what you should actually be doing during that lesson. Absolutely invaluable. And this you can get for £15 from Flylight. As well as all of your textbooks, you're also going to need to buy some other materials as well to help you through your training process and through the exams. So for example, for the navigation exam and for the navigation part of the syllabus, you are going to need to buy yourself some CAA charts, some air maps so you know where you're going. And as well as that, you're also going to need to buy yourself some pens and rulers. And there's also a thing in here called a flight computer, or a whiz wheel as some people call it, which is to do with helping you work out directions and wind speeds and velocities and all that sort of stuff. It's a bit complicated. I won't go into that now. And also to log your flight training and to log your flights, you're going to need to buy yourself a pilot's logbook. So all of these materials all together cost me £60. In order to help you learn all of this stuff, a lot of flying schools operate ground schools as well, which obviously you would have to pay for. For example, the school that I fly from through the winter operate ground schools on a Wednesday evening or a Thursday evening. I can't remember which one it is. Unfortunately, because of the shift pattern that I work, I wasn't able to commit to that. So I had to teach myself essentially. However, if you can attend a ground school, it is well worth the money because you can actually speak to an instructor and ask them questions if you don't understand something. You can't do that from reading a textbook or by learning online. Talking of online though, I did pay for a subscription to something called QuizAero, which is an online product which it helps you through the exams, and there's also a series of mock exams that you can take, and I found it extremely useful. I'll put the description to QuizAero down below. That subscription cost me £35. The actual exams themselves, you have to pay for each exam that you take. You're paying for an examiner's time. There are 5 exams. When I took them, they were £35 each. So if you do the maths, that works out at a total of £175. The last expense that I had in getting my license was the actual general skills test itself, which I had to pay for, and that was a total of £215. So after all that expense and having passed your test, you think you'd be done. You're not quite done, because in order to actually apply for your license, you also have to give the CAA a little bit of money, and the application fee for the license was a total of £180. So adding all of those numbers up, how much did it cost me to get my NPPL? Right, well, if you add all of those numbers up, the grand total is £5,669. Now, you might think, oh, that's a lot of money, that is. However, if you compare that with the cost of gaining a private pilot's license, so you can fly things like Cessnas and Pipers and all that sort of stuff, my sources tell me that compared to the PPL, the average PPL student in the UK is currently spending between £12,500 and £17,000. So you can see, in comparison, the Microlight license NPPL is an awful lot cheaper. The next expense that I incurred was to do with my radio license. Now, you might not realise that if an aircraft has a radio fitted, in order for you to use that radio, you need to have an operator license, or a flight radio telephony operator's license to give it its full title, or FIRTLE, which is easier to say. Now, this is an optional extra. You don't need to use a radio. You can fly quite legally without one. However, it is safer if you can use a radio, because you can listen in to see what's going on around you. And there are some airfields that will not let you land there if you do not have a radio on board and you are able to use it. So it is an optional extra. In order to get that license, there are yet 2 more exams that you need to take. There's a written examination and a practical examination as well as another license application fee to the CAA. In order to pass the written examinations, there are a couple of books I would recommend. Parts of the Air Pilot Manual series, books number 6 and 7. If you were to buy these will teach you everything that you need to know in order to pass the written examination. These books cost £25. And then in order to pass the practical examination, there are a number of commercial operators that operate training courses. Now, I signed up for a day's training with an organisation called Plain Speak. I'll put their details down below, operated by a chap called Andy Moon, who is a commercial pilot himself. And that course was a days-long course that took me through all of the information that we needed to know. It was the written examination and the practical examination and the licence fee all rolled into one, and that cost me £250. So the total cost for me to get my flight radio telephony operator's licence was £275. So you've got your license, maybe you've even got your radio license, and you're all ready to go. What are you going to fly? Well, at some point you're going to need access to your own aircraft, and there are a number of ways of going about that, and a huge variation in the associated costs. One thing that you can do is you can join a syndicate, which is one way of keeping the costs down, where a number of you will buy a share in an aircraft. Obviously that keeps the cost down and the ongoing maintenance cost down, because it's shared amongst a number of people. If you don't want to do that and you want to buy your own aircraft, then there are perfectly flyable 2-seat Flexwing aircrafts for sale at the moment in the UK for as little as £3,000. At the other end of the scale, if you wanted to buy a brand new top of the range 2-seater Flexwing, you will be looking at £50,000 to £60,000. If you were flying a 3-axis Microlight, then you could be spending hundreds of thousands of pounds. So there really is absolutely something for every budget. Just after I passed my general skills test, I bought a half share in a Quantum 912 Flexwing Microlight. Unfortunately, that was about the same sort of time that the company that made them, P&M, went into liquidation, so parts became very, very scarce, and so it was going to get expensive to maintain that aircraft, so I decided to sell it and I wanted to buy a brand new aircraft. And the aircraft that I chose was the Flexwing BVB single-seater. So how much did that cost me? Well, I've got the sales receipt in front of me. So my Flexwing BVB aircraft, as it came from the factory, which included the trike, the wing, which was shipped over to the UK, the engine, which came from Italy, the propeller, the battery, the fairing, plus some extra options that I had fitted. So I had some larger wheels fitted, I had a disc brake fitted, I had some luggage carrying capability fitted. I also had a moto monitor, which is an engine monitoring system. I had that fitted as well. And then the registration letters and the wing graphics. All together, including VAT, the actual aircraft itself cost £13,248. Once I bought the aircraft, I did fit some extra toys as well. Firstly, having bought the aircraft, I then had to register it with the CAA, which again, you've got to give the CAA some money, haven't you, every time you do anything. That cost £73. I also fitted a radio, a Yaesu radio, I can never pronounce that. The radio cost £169. And then the radio itself, if you fit a radio to an aircraft, the radio needs its own permit, which is administered through Ofcom. That was only £15 though, and that does last for 3 years, so that wasn't too expensive. And then finally, I fitted an electronic conspicuity device to the aircraft, a Skyway Code, which lets me see other aircraft and then lets them see me as well. That device was £500, but at the time the CAA were running a rebate scheme, which basically gave you £250 off. So the Skyway Code cost me £250. So my aircraft in total, the grand total is £13,755. Now, personally, I don't think that is a lot of money for owning your own aircraft. It's about the same as owning a second car. Right, finally, you've got your license, you've got your aircraft. How much does it cost to keep that aircraft airworthy each year? What are the ongoing costs? Right, well, I've written all of mine down on a bit of paper, and I will take you through them. So first off, where are you going to actually keep your aircraft? Now, if you own something like a sub-70 or a single-seat deregulated Flexwing aircraft, it's quite feasible that you can keep that at home in your garage, and that's not going to cost you anything. But if you want the convenience of having it at an airfield and ready to go at a minute's notice, then you're going to need to pay some sort of hangarage fee. Now, I pay at Darley Moor Airfield £50 a month to keep my BVB in the hangar in a de-rigged state, so that's with the wings folded back. On top of the hangarage, I also have to pay a membership fee to be a member of the Flying Club at Darley Moor, but that's very reasonable. That's only £10 a month, and that basically pays for all of your landing fees. So in total, each year I pay for hangarage and airfield membership a total of £720. Right, the next item on my annual costs is insurance. Now, insurance is a thing. In order to fly a registered aircraft legally, you need to have a minimum of third-party insurance. Now, I get my third-party insurance through the BHPA, or the British Hang Gliding and Paragliding Association. Essentially, if you are a member of the BHPA and you are a qualified Microlight pilot, then that membership includes third-party insurance to fly that Microlight. And in total, my membership to the BHPA each year costs me £169. Right, the next item on my list, and that is BMAA membership, or British Microlight Aircraft Association membership. Now, this is an optional thing. You don't have to be a member of the BMAA to fly a Microlight. However, if you do fly a Microlight, I would strongly urge you to join the British Microlight Aircraft Association. A lot of the privileges that we have to fly Microlights, we have because of the work that the BMAA does for us. So to support them, I would absolutely recommend that you become a member. The next thing on the list is a SkyDemon subscription. Now, SkyDemon is an electronic flight book application that you can have on your mobile phone. Essentially, it's a sat-nav for flying, but it's also really useful for flight planning. And it's a good way of getting access to aviation weather and things like NOTAMs, which are notice to airmen. Now, I have to pay a subscription to be able to use SkyDemon, and that costs me each year a total of £144. Next item on the list is my radio license. Now, as I said earlier, I have a radio fitted to my aircraft, and any radio device fitted to an aircraft has to have its own permit, which is very, very reasonable. It's only £15, and that does last for 3 years, so that works out at £5. £1,000 a year. The next item on the list is revalidation. Now, if you have an NPPL license, you have to revalidate it every 24 months, and if you want to keep the 2-seat rating on that license, part of that revalidation is you have to undergo an hour's instruction. Now, an hour's lesson at the moment costs around £135 on a Flexwing. You have to do it every 2 years, so that works out at £67 a year. Right, almost there. Next thing, parts and servicing. Now, servicing, certainly if you own a deregulated aircraft like I do, then the servicing you can do yourself. It's not difficult, and doing it yourself makes it an awful lot cheaper. And the parts themselves are not expensive. In terms of things that I've had to replace on an annual basis, I'm talking about things like fuel lines, filters, primer bulbs, spark plugs, maybe the odd gasket here or there. There's a little bit in the carburetor that you have to change every year. The parts are not at all expensive, and I've not really had to replace anything. I've had to replace one inner tube, and I don't think anything else is actually broken. So I would certainly say that I spend definitely no less than £200 a year on parts, and that's being generous. My final expense, and that is fuel. Now, obviously this depends on how much flying you're going to do. Most microlight pilots end up flying an awful lot less than they actually anticipate that they will do, and I think the average is between 30 and 40 hours a year. Now, I'm probably closer to 30 because of work commitments, so if I budgeted for 30 hours of flying a year, my aircraft burns 5 litres of fuel an hour. So factor in that, and also chucking in a bit of 2-stroke oil, I spend about £300 a year on fuel. So if I add all of those costs up each year to keep my aircraft flying, I spend a total of £1,704. That works out to be £142 a month, and when you put it that way, I don't think that's a lot of money. So there you go, that is a detailed breakdown of how much it cost me to go flying my Microlight. Now, I know that personal finances is a very individual thing, and what might be affordable to one person might not be affordable to the next. I consider myself to be extremely lucky to be in a position where I could get my private pilot's license, buy an aircraft and keep it in the air. So I hope you found this useful, and I hope that I've demonstrated that Microlight aviation is a relatively cheap form of aviation. When people ask me how much it is, I basically say it's about the cost of running a second-hand car. So if you can afford to run a second vehicle, you could afford to fly a Microlight. So if you found this video useful, it'd be brilliant if you gave it a thumbs up. It really does help the channel out. If you know somebody that's thinking about learning how to fly, then please feel free to share this video with them. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, then it'd be brilliant if you did. So I hope you found it useful, and I will see you on the next one.